Welcome, everybody, to this week's episode. We really appreciate you joining us. This podcast really shows us how we can all learn, live, and thrive off of each other. By sharing our knowledge through our conversations, we will impart some knowledge whilst learning ourselves how to progress even further. Here is your host.
Scott, we are on the Personal Development Hub. Thank you so much for joining us today. If you are live, put some comments in the comment section. Say hello to Julie. She's our special guest today. And what I can't seem to manage, Julie, is that I get the other screen happening and talking to me at the same time. So I apologize. So everyone, let's get excited. We have Julie Sack here, who is, I've written this down, a leadership success coach and also founder of the Emerald Nest Business Solutions. It sounds super official, very awesome.
Oh, doesn't it?
It does. So it sounds quite esteemed. So Julie, thank you so much. Welcome to the Personal Development Tuesday Talks. How are you today?
I am very well, thank you. And it does sound very esteemed because you know what, Mary, you can just decide that's what you want to sound like. And that's what I did. I just decided that that's the title that I wanted to have and I wanted it to sound that way. So here I am.
Oh, that's awesome. Now, we've spoken before, and one of the things that I found with you is that you just get on with it. You decide, just like you said then, and you get on with it. Is that generally how you are? You're someone that gets on with it?
Absolutely. I think that I think anyone who knows me would say that is part of my character. And in fact, the last team that I was the manager of, they were going to make me a shirt that says "Get shit done," because that's what they saw in me. I get shit done.
I love that. I love someone with a strong action cycle. That's beautiful. Now, you've transitioned from being employed to working for yourself. Was there a particular learning curve that you could talk about relating to your personal growth that we might start with today?
Yes, let's go to that particular learning curve. So there has been a very big learning curve.
Was it vertical?
Yeah, it was pretty vertical. Maybe vertical heading down that way rather than up.
Yeah.
To start with. So about 4.5 months ago, my job ended. I was made redundant, and it came out of, well, I can't say it came out of nowhere because there were signs over a few months, but I didn't put two and two together until it was too late. So I was more worried about what was happening to other people in my team, and I wasn't thinking that my job was under threat. But then I found out that they had decided to disestablish my role. And for someone who's normally just gets shit done and works really hard and just gets on with things, I plummeted. I completely lost all my confidence, all my resilience. And it was really, really tough. It has been it's been a really tough time, but I then took that vertical upwards, get back to who I was. But it was a bit of a journey of disappearing down a hole and then having to figure out how I was going to climb back out of it. And that's, I think it's something that I have done a couple of times in my life. But this one was really tough because I guess I wasn't expecting it. At other times I had made choices to change things in my life. This one wasn't a choice, and I think that's what made it really hard.
Yes, and the thing is and let me put it another way, you actually had the choice taken away from you. That's a very different dynamic. That's a king hit, that is, and you're left reeling. Whereas if you're in charge and you're making choices according to your plan, your schedule, very different. So after you got king hit, that's my words incidentally, because I think if you're not expecting something, it is quite shocking. What
That explains it quite well, actually. It was a real blow, a real king hit.
what do you remember? Like, how were you feeling? Your breast's just been knocked out of the park. Do you remember that feeling?
Oh, absolutely, I do. I remember the penny dropped that I knew I was about to be told. When there were a couple of life events that had happened at the same time. So it's something that I've actually been writing about is the life events. We lost a really close friend to suicide. And the same week my daughter had a baby and she nearly lost her life. She's fine. She's got a beautiful, healthy little boy. We've got a lovely grandson. But those big life events happened, and my supervisor asked if I would like them to delay the change proposal because of my situation. There were 7 other people waiting to find out about their roles. I didn't think mine was at risk, but I knew other people's were. And as soon as she said, do you want me to delay this because of what's going on in your life? I just knew.
Wow.
I just knew that it was me that was going to be impacted, and they were trying to soften the blow and thought, oh, she's already in a bit of a crisis at the moment personally. Do we want to throw this on her as well? And I just said, people have been waiting. It was 7 months that we'd all been waiting for these decisions to be made, and that's a very long time for an organisation to have that hanging over people's heads. And I just said, no, everyone's been waiting for too long. This has to happen. People need to know their futures. And I knew then that it was me as well that was going to find out. Yeah. So then there was the formal meeting, because they do. I mean, they have a process. I know now that my supervisor knew about this for months, but wasn't able to say anything because of the processes they have to follow. There were a lot of differences in the way that I was being communicated with. There were a lot of barriers being put up that I was getting frustrated and couldn't understand why. I know now because there was no future. But at the time, it was just a lot of frustration, a lot of stress. And all of the other people that were part of my team, there were roles created in other areas that they could transition to if they chose. But mine was the only one that was completely cut.
How interesting. So let me grasp this. You lost a good friend. Your daughter was in crisis with her life. And then suddenly you're in crisis with your job.
Yeah.
All within a very short space of time. Have I understood this correctly?
Absolutely.
Like, the magnitude of this, Julie, is huge, isn't it?
Well, I like to look for positives in every situation. And one of the positives was that having those big life events happening, you realise that work doesn't rate.
Yeah, good point.
It really isn't significant. You've got to get your perspective right. Your friends and your family are who matters. Work has always been really, really important to me. I've always thrown myself 100% in. I'm really passionate about everything that I do. But it did put it into perspective, because those are the things that should rock your foundations. Losing your job, yes, It hurt, and it did rip away confidence and resilience, but I knew I'd come back from it. You don't come back from losing someone, but you can come back from losing a job.
Yes, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I was saying, I've forgotten what I said then. How did you do that? How did you come back?
Well, I think for a while, what I had decided was that I was going to try and have a healthy routine. That I needed to get up in the morning, I needed to have a shower, I needed to put clothes on. There was not to be any wallowing around in my pajamas, watching Netflix and eating bread and cake and getting fat and sassy. Sounds like it'd be great fun, but I knew that was a downhill slope to be on. But I really struggled. I consciously said this is what I have to do, but I really struggled to do it. Monday mornings were the hardest. So every Monday morning, I did not want to get out of bed. Like I'd always have a great weekend because we do a lot of family stuff, and then Monday morning, when I should be getting up, checking my email, getting my team engaged, doing all the exciting things, I wasn't. So that was really hard. So I really had to push myself to get up and go and do something on a Monday morning, go and get a cup of coffee, go for a walk at the river, go and do something that gives me joy. So I made sure I did that, and I made sure to look for things that I could be grateful for. Like really, it's the little things. Those little things, like you go to the coffee shop and the guy's singing away and he's happy and he knows your order when you walk in, and you're grateful for that. And you go to the river and you feel the sun and the cool, crisp morning air, and you just stop and you feel it. And you be really mindful about all those things that you need to be grateful for. And I just kept doing that, but I had to consciously decide to keep doing that every day. And then I started to try and unpack, what is it that I actually care about? Because I cared so much about my job. I cared about what we were doing. It had really big social impact outcomes. It was about access to university for disadvantaged people, for people who hadn't completed high school, and that was me. And my values were so closely aligned with the work that I did that I don't think I knew how to separate them. So I started to question whether my values were mine or whether they were the job's.
Good.
Who was I that existed outside of that job and the job before, which was teaching, which is another social impact, high values aligned career. So who was I and what did I genuinely care about outside of that work? And then where could I channel that?
That's fantastic. And it's funny, I like what you're saying. You're saying you were the job, weren't you? And that got removed. So then who am I? And then your backup was being in the here and now. You consciously stepped into the here and now, like be present, be present, be present. This is what I'm hearing.
Yep.
And focus on what you're grateful for. And so if you're listening, these are little tips. They're big tips, really. So staying in the here and now and being grateful, was that the way into finding who Julie was? Julie wasn't that job. Julie wasn't that organisation, wasn't that team. So did that help with the emergence of who you are today? And I know it's still a short time.
It did. Yeah, it's still a short time, and I'm still, I think we're all growing into who we're going to be all the time. Like we're never stagnant. We're always growing and evolving. But the other thing that I did, and I had this deep sense of my confidence being stripped and questioning whether it was me or my role that was made redundant. And I was questioning, overthinking previous conversations, trying to find times where I could have made the outcome different, times where I could have spotted some of the toxicity that I'd seen and acted on it different. Like you go through the what ifs. And I just felt this need to be validated. And it doesn't matter how great your support system is, doesn't matter how many people that I used to work with that tell me, no, it wasn't your fault. You were a fabulous manager. We were so happy under your leadership. Doesn't matter how many people tell you that. It's like I just needed some external validation. So I started madly applying for jobs. I started putting in all of these job applications for jobs I was not in the frame of mind to take, but I just had this need to get to interview, for someone to say, yes, she's worthy, let's have a look at her. And I got one. So I got an interview at a fairly prestigious company, really high social impact outcomes, but the job was not located where I'm located and they weren't able to do a remote or hybrid situation. But I went through to the interview and they actually asked me in the screening call and said, why are you interested in this job? And I couldn't really say for external validation. So I talked about how much I admired the work they did and how it aligned with the work I'd been doing and my values. And yeah, they put me through to interview, and it was such a fabulous experience. And it was like, it just restored my confidence. It was like all of a sudden the spark was back, and I felt like me, and I felt validated. And then, of course, I wasn't going to take that job, and it wasn't going to work I wasn't going to move to where they wanted it to be. And as soon as I knew that I could get back on the horse, put the horse in the stable and locked it away. It was like, no, okay, I'm right now. I'm going to take some time and work out what it is I really want to do and work out what path I really want to take.
Let me ask you something, because I think that you're making a very good point here. Nothing else was going to cut it until you got some external validation. Why do you think that was important?
I don't know. I asked myself that quite a bit, because the people who know you best are the ones that you should trust their opinions of. Somebody who's just looked at you on a piece of paper as a resume doesn't know the true heart and soul of you. So why I needed that validation, I don't know.
The first thought that comes to me, and forgive me, I know nothing about the situation, but it gives some objectivity. That's what I was thinking.
Yeah.
You're right. They don't know you. They're just reading the screen, but it also gives another perspective, which is what you mentioned when we first started talking about perspectives.
Yeah.
And those three, let's call them critical incidents, gave you some very good perspective. And when you're speaking to people, especially when they don't know you, and then they have a conversation and they essentially say, yes, you can jump now to this part of the process, you go, oh, they've seen me.
Yep.
And I wonder if that was part of it, that you got seen, they were objective. Like, I'm making up a story here, so don't let me put words in your mouth, but there's nothing like that, is there? When you finally
I
get
think you've nailed it. You've nailed it, Mary. That I think that is exactly what it is. It's having that objective perspective, not the one that I mean, the people who know and love you. It's like they have to say the right things. I know it feels genuine, but when somebody else says it, it backs it up.
Yes, and I think it's well, the other opinions about from friends, it's very subjective, and they love you and they're wanting to be kind and they want to make it better, and that makes perfect sense, doesn't it? They come to you from a heart-centered perspective. They just want to wrap you up in cotton wool, and that doesn't strike me as you. You wanted to step out there, give it a go. Now, the other thing about this situation that occurs to me is that 3 life events, and I called them critical before. I think they were and they are 3 critical life events that close together, that theoretically, I'm trying to pull it out of my brain, when you have that many life events over 12 months, it's significant. It usually affects
trauma, isn't it, Mary? It's trauma.
Yes, it affects your mental health. I was going to say it affects your health. But you didn't have it over 12 months. You had it all jammed in. The reason
pretty much a week. It was in a week.
Whoa. See, I can almost feel that. It's just like, whoa. And I think it takes a particular type of person to even be able to, like the meerkats, to even get your head up enough to feel the wind is pretty courageous. And I know that there's been lots of research done, like I say, over a year, where people then follow with being sick, and mental health issues, etc., etc. But one word that you just said, trauma, absolutely. Is it trauma? Yes, it is. What do you believe was the other kind of connection that helped preserve you a little bit during that, let's say, the first 3 weeks?
I think it was what I know about a positive mindset, that your brain believes what you tell it. If you continually tell yourself you're fat, you're stupid, you're ugly, your skin's awful, people don't like you, that's what you believe. But if you tell yourself, even if you're not fully believing it, if you are telling yourself, I'm worthy, I have something to offer the world, I'm good at what I do, I'm intelligent, I just need some time to pull all that back together and get back to something that I'm purposeful and passionate about. And I had to just deliberately choose to keep thinking that way. And it wasn't always easy, but it was just a deliberate choice to just keep telling myself, you are going to be okay. And it's something I tell people that I coach and that I work with. What would you say to your amazing, intelligent friend who was feeling that way? And then I tell them to turn the mirror around and say it to yourself. Be your own best friend.
Where did you learn that, Julie? Where does that come from historically?
I guess I've made a lot of choices in my life, and you've just got to own them. You can't go through your life blaming everybody else for the things that you do. Whatever situation you're in, you've got to take ownership of it. And I dropped out of school when I was 16, and I got pregnant and had a lot of kids. All of a sudden, boom, 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 one after the other. I had 5 of them.
Good
And
for you.
so I'm a very young grandma.
Oh, that's lovely. You're the second person I know that has 5 children, and the other one's an absolute delight as well. So that's lovely. But, is there a time earlier where you made a decision, where you knew you made a decision to focus on mindset, and that you have to
I think that's been part of me all my life. I'm stubborn and I'm independent. And that's being a teenage mother in a small community. You either submit to the judgment that's put on you, because there's a lot, or you rise above it. And I was so stubborn and independent that I rose above it. And that's how I've approached everything in life, is if I say I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it. And if you say I can't do it, well, I'm going to do it even better.
Isn't it funny talking about small communities and judgment? My goodness, I can only imagine the thrashing that you got. If you didn't hear it directly, you certainly would have covertly heard about. Did you hear about it? Oh, goodness me. And, nothing much has changed, because if you're in my age group, that's what happened way back then. It's still happening now. You're younger than me, clearly. And I guess that there's that other thing called judgment, how somehow some people think they have the right to make judgment or pass judgment about other people, not knowing what's just below the surface. Fascinating, isn't it? So it's interesting. I've been thinking, because I've got my boot camp coming up this weekend, about business and the fundamentals. And I was thinking about different books that have been written, Earl Nightingale and, all of those early fathers, if you like, and they were fathers. I don't know many females from back then. What they were saying then, we're just saying it now in a different way. And I giggle if I listen to some of those old recordings, the way they speak and the words they used, and they wouldn't last 5 minutes. But my point is this, that I actually wonder how far we've come about judgment. And there's that other word.
We're not as far as we think we have.
No, I agree. And it's a bit sad, isn't it? We're supposed to be evolving. We're supposed to be growing. How the hell does that work, Julie? What's that about? it's quite a mystery sometimes to me, and I'm a particularly curious person, and I believe you are too. You have a lot of curiosity. Otherwise, you would not have survived such a thrashing back a few months ago. Let me ask you this. Oh my goodness, look at that, the time. And if you're here, let me just take a little interval, as it were. Oh my gosh, I just realized we've been chatting away. If you're listening live, please put comments in. Julie's already given us some really very powerful steps to overcome enormous adversity. So I want you to write there in the comments right now, if you're listening, some of those comments. How have you heard them? So that when she comes back in later, she can then interact with you, because that's the key here. Julie, let's go back to you. What do you believe, or what was your very first encounter? We started with just a few months ago about your vertical challenge, but even before you got pregnant, left school, all that, before that, do you ever now retrospectively look back and go, oh, that was all about personal development, I didn't get it then?
Oh, look, I don't have a lot of recollection of stuff that happened prior to that, because I guess that was such a significant time in my life. It felt like that's when my life started. I've got an amazing family. So I've got no childhood trauma that's that's driven anything that's happened to me in the future. But I've always been a learner, and I think that, and I've always been independent. And I think those two things are self-development in a nutshell, is that if you're continually learning and you take ownership of that learning, that to me is what self-development is. And it has characterized my entire life. I put myself through university when my kids were really small, and that was challenging, raising a young family and trying to study and by distance, back before we had all this amazing technology where you could actually speak to people online. Was a bunch of books sent to you in a package and you worked on it all by yourself in isolation. And I established a really successful career in teaching and with the Department of Education, and I actually burnt out. I pushed myself so hard trying to juggle all of those aspects of my life and trying to be awesome at all of them, that I wasn't being awesome at any of them. And I burnt out and had to walk away from teaching. And that was maybe 7 years ago. And that was really tough, because that was a job that I really loved as well. But I made the choice. I owned that choice. I decided I needed to do something different, that I needed to be present for my family and myself, and not just for the school and the parents and the kids. And I had to walk away from that. No, I didn't have to. I chose to walk away from that. And I found a job which still fueled my passion, which was at a university. And it was in that job that I climbed the ranks and ended up in a really great leadership role. But only 2 or 3 months after leaving teaching, one of my teenage kids said to me, "Geez, Mum, you're so much happier now." And I just thought to myself, boy, I must have been a bitch before. And I was. But it felt like a weight lifted off my shoulders when I made that choice. Whereas this redundancy that I'd just been through, it was a weight being put on my shoulders. It was a very different feeling. Both of them took courage. Both of them were things that were going to drastically alter the path of my life. I could have happily stayed in teaching for years and years and climbed the ranks there, but I just couldn't be everything I needed to be while I was being consumed by that role. And anybody who's listening who's a teacher or knows one, it is consuming.
Absolutely it is. Absolutely it is. And it's interesting, isn't it? Your life started at 16 when you left school. That's what you said. It felt like.
Yeah, that's what it feels like. Absolutely.
You had a good family behind you. I'm imagining that actually was pretty solid to help the 16-year-old young woman go, well, hang on a minute. Yes, I've got children, but I like to learn. Now I'm going to go to university. And I bet there's a few people poo-hooed that as well. What do you think you're doing? You've got children to look after. Was there any of that?
Absolutely, there was. Absolutely.
And by then you were quite resilient because you'd had it all before when you had your first child. Isn't it interesting how one thing built, like it's not rocket science, I know, but I'm always interested to hear how one thing builds on the next. And without even knowing it, we're becoming more and more resilient. And then you combine, what was it? Stubbornness and independence. Do those two kind of ricochet off a bit of each other a bit?
Yeah, I think they do.
I was just thinking, it's funny, stubbornness. Have you got the capacity to back down if you need to, or you're just stubborn?
No, I absolutely am able to take feedback. I'm able to take criticism, and I'm able to back down. And if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. I'm very open. I think the stubbornness is linked to the independence. I want to get the stuff done, and I want to achieve what I need to achieve. And there's an efficiency as well that I think is attached to it. So, yeah. And I think that has helped a lot as well. So you become because I was so damn busy with lots of young kids, and my husband he was working as well. And so juggling all of that, you become really efficient. Like you can smash out a pretty damn good assignment at 2 a.m. the day it's due if you need to. Well, yeah, cuddling a baby, and you can do all of that if you need to.
I think there's a book in that, Julie. There's a book in that.
Mary, you inspired me when we talked a couple of weeks ago. You said, you need to write about this. I have actually just written my first ebook.
Oh, wow. That's
done.
Awesome.
It's done. It's just I'm getting some editing done now, and I'm ready to release it. So all of that story of how I've pulled myself back from this last critical events. I like how you've explained it that way. Critical incidents. I've captured it all. I've written about it, and it's been really therapeutic to write about it.
Absolutely. You send me a copy. I want to read that, Julie. I think that'll be a bit of a treat. Now, the other thing that I keep hearing, it's kind of underlying everything that you're saying to me, is self-responsibility. You're quite happy to take responsibility for yourself, aren't you?
Yeah.
Did that start also with the 16-year-old young woman, or was that modeled to you?
No, that's a choice. I made that choice, and I have to own it. And I am very happy with that choice. I've got 5 amazing young adults and grandkids, and everything is fine. But it's not what society would have predicted for me in that situation.
Oh, what do you think they would have predicted? Let's hear the other side.
What is the judgment that's usually placed on a teen mother that drops out of school? What are the outcomes predicted for people?
Pretty grim.
Yeah. So, and we were poor. We were really poor, and because I was so stubborn, I had a wonderful family who would have. I knew I was never going to go hungry, but I didn't ask for help.
Oh, there's a good one to learn from.
So it was always good to know. I mean, there are a lot of people who don't have the privilege of that kind of back-in, but I was so independent that we did it on our own, that there was no financial help. There could have been if I wanted there to be, but we did it all on our own. And there may have been times where we had cereal for dinner, but nobody suffered long term for that.
I think lovely what you just said. I think that's beautiful. That we would have had, sometimes we would have had cereal for dinner. And you know what? I'm guessing that people just put their head down and said, "This tastes good, Mum."
Yep.
Yeah, that's very,
What do
very,
kids need, Mary? They need love.
yep.
They need food. And we had decided we wanted to model good work ethic to them. So that's what we did. We worked really hard and we modeled that to our kids. We made those choices.
And so in your modeling, can you see it in your children about that whole self-responsibility, making it happen rather than being the victim to it all? Do you see that now?
Absolutely. Yep. I've seen them. I think one of the things that you can say as a mother is that when you have done a good job, it means your kids are confident enough to fly the nest. I know there's a lot of people who want to keep their kids really close and don't want them to ever leave. And I think when you've done a great job is when they feel independent and confident. And I've got one in America, I've got one in Perth, I've got one that's just come back from Perth. Like they're off doing things, they're off living their best lives. There's a couple that have got kids of their own, and one's running her own business, and they're doing life, and they're doing it. I'm there to support them, but I'm not running it for them.
Yeah,
and I
big
think
difference
that's
what you're saying there, actually. Big difference.
yeah. So I feel really successful, even though there's been some times where it hasn't been perfect. And I certainly, when I was teaching, I threw myself far too much into that role. I've got a lot of parental guilt from the times that I could have been spending with my kids, but I was working. But I still feel like the end goal, well, we're not at the end, but the where we're at this point, I feel like it's been successful.
That's brilliant. Would they, or have they ever said to you, your adult children that are spread wide, how they're grateful for what you've modeled to them?
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, I've asked them outright, what could I have done differently? What could I have done? What, not me, I raised the children with my husband. What could we have done differently? And they all say, no, there's nothing you could have done. You did everything right, even during the tough times, even when you were too strict and not letting us do the things we wanted to do. No, they're all really satisfied with what they have been given.
Oh, that's brilliant, isn't it? That's quite, you talk about validation earlier on. I mean, that's validating when you see your kids doing things that you know you would make the same decision, apart from the fact that it's a bit of an, oh my God situation. My gosh, this parenting worked. Look at that. Look what's happened. You know, because you can't always say that. And I think that's lovely. And the fact, I like what you're saying about letting your children, I had a little picture then of a bird flying out of the nest and not being pulled back, you know, like, okay, you know, you've got your wings now, off you go.
Yeah.
And so do you think there's lots of parents around that keep their children and hold them back and restrict them? Have you seen that happening out there in society?
Absolutely, I have. Yes. Yeah. They can't. They say they want them to grow up and be independent, but then I don't know, over mother them. I don't know if that's as kids become adults and mothers are still interfering in their day-to-day bits and pieces. I guess I've always had so much else that I'm doing. Firstly, I don't have time for that because I'm too busy. I'm chasing my career and dreams. But I don't think that they need that. I don't think it's healthy for young adults I think it's healthy for them to have really close and loving relationships with their parents, but I don't think it's healthy for them to be dependent or codependent. I think it is. I think it's a codependency.
It's a very good point that what you're making there, actually. And I imagine, now I'm just taking a bit of a punt here, really. I imagine some of what creates that is that whole thing of worthiness, being good enough, feeling loved, having awareness, that whole personal development thing of their parents, that they can't actually, I hope I'm articulating this in a clear fashion, they can't then release their child to have their own learnings because they're still wanting to be fulfilled themselves. Does any of that make sense?
Yep. And I think that's where, as you get to that nest part, empty nest part of your life, that's where you really need to shift your focus on fulfilling your own bucket. It's not up to your kids to fill the bucket for you. You've got to fill your own bucket.
Yes.
And when you were saying about flying the nest, my business name is Emerald Nest Business Solutions, and that came about through some brainstorming with my kids. And I said, I've had this epiphany. I'm going to become a leadership coach. I'm going to eradicate bad managers across the world. I'm going to change everything. I'm going to be amazing. And I don't know what to call my business. And so there was a lot of back and forth and they were thinking about, like, my favorite colors, green, and we were talking about they've always sort of imagine that I'm the wise owl of the family, and we're looking at those sort of things, and the ideas bounced around until we came up with Emerald Nest. So this is the nest. This is my nest that I'm in now, and they have come from this. They have come from this nest that I've created, and now they're off living their lives.
That's beautiful. And
now the nest is for me and my business.
And you're offering solutions. I like that you added that word as well, business solutions, because
I'm a problem solver. And that's been a I'll tell you about that one, Mary. A real shift in my thinking occurred. A lot of people in COVID were baking bread and drinking a lot of wine. I did that too. But my COVID hobby was I decided to do a counselling course. So I became not a psychology, a counselling course. So I became a qualified counsellor. And what that did for me was shift the way that I communicated with people that I was managing. So I'd done a lot of coaching previously, and parenting is the ultimate coaching role, isn't it?
Absolutely.
I started thinking about what I do is I jump to solving the problem before the person's even explained what the problem is. Okay. So I did it with my kids all the time. They'd start to have a grumble about something and I'm solving that problem, getting shit done. And what I've had to do is pull that right back and allow people to have that journey and facilitate that journey of them discovering that thinking themselves, guiding them through it. I've already decided what the solution is, but they need to find the solution. They need to come to it and they need to own it, and they need to be able to feel that sense of responsibility for their own destiny and their own development. Absolutely. And that was a real shift for me in the last couple of years.
Yeah, that's a good shift, isn't it? And look, I can relate to so much of that, what you're saying, because I'm quite strategic in my mind about, and solution focused as well, solution orientated, that I can tend to be I'm already at stage 7 and they're still unraveling the first stage. And it's like, and I honestly get tempted, and I'll fess up right now. I say, have you thought of, just to throw the plates in the air a little bit. Some of them break, but some of them have breakthroughs. But, I remember last year I was on this forum. I can't even remember. I think it was in a group that I was in, and there was someone who was a coach who said that you've just got to keep asking, and how do you feel about that? And what do you think you should do about that? And I was like, no. I said, excuse me. She's like, what? I said, look, I think that as coaches, we have to be courageous enough to offer some solutions. Otherwise, some people will never, ever, ever discover the magic of their own solutions. You have to go, well, have you thought of this? What about that? What about that? And then they go, oh, yeah. And they do all the puzzling in their mind. But I tell you, this woman was quite shocked. She, oh, well, that's pretty direct. I don't think you would call that coaching, Mary. But I think it's a worthy thing. Otherwise, well, let's face it, people know a lot about what they don't want to do. They don't always know about what they do want to do. Is that your experience?
Yes, and then honing in on what is the action they're actually going to take. There might be 7 different viable solutions, and maybe I threw a couple in and they threw a couple in and we made a few that evolved from that, but they have to make the decision on what the next step is. They have to take the decision and the action.
That's right. I agree. I wanted to go back to emerald nest. When you think about the colour emerald, it's vital, isn't it? If you see a true emerald stone, how rich they are. And the nest, well, if you look at nests, sometimes they wobble around a bit, but there is a particular part of time when they're stable and they hold the babies, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is this what you're doing? Have I just described what you're doing? It's pretty cool, isn't it? I can't get that emerald colour out of my head, and I've got this vision in my head of this beautiful emerald stone. I don't know where that comes from, incidentally, but I think that you're a bit of a diamond, actually. I don't believe you're an emerald. I think you're a diamond, because you know how diamonds are formed, don't you?
Yes.
Under pressure.
Yep. And I'm happy to be the rough cut diamond too. Don't need to be polished, just need to get out there and do it.
So what would you say to someone that's not getting shit done, Julie?
I would say take some responsibility, pick an action and do it. One thing at a time. Things can seem really overwhelming when you look at the big picture, but it's each day, pick something that is moving you towards your goals, not away from them. Pick one thing that you can do, whether it's go for a walk and feel the breeze and be grateful for it, whether it's having a shower and putting your clothes on. Like sometimes those are the steps that you need to take that are towards your future. Then eventually those steps become starting a business, aligning your values with what you want to do, working with amazing clients from around the world. It turns into what you want. And I know it's a bit of a catchphrase that's been thrown around, that manifest it and it will happen. But it is actually true.
Yes, it is actually true. That's lovely, isn't it? And I like it. I certainly attest to that notion of just take the next step, even if it's putting your jammies aside and getting in the shower and feeling the water on you. If that's the next step, that's the next step. And I think one of the things that I say to people in my work is start where you're at.
Mm.
You don't need to keep up with everyone else or feel like they're better than and I'm less than. You have to start where you're at. And you're a very good testament to that. You started exactly where you're at. And where would you say, and was this where you thought you'd be 4.5 months down the track?
No, absolutely not. I honestly, at this, say 5 months ago, before I knew that I was losing my job, I thought that I would be in a really stressful situation in my work right now, managing some really big problems. And that choice was taken away from me. The problems are still happening, but they're not my problems, not my monkeys, not my circus. So I have had to let that go, and that was hard. But I kind of thought that I would just move into another job, but then having that sort of realization and that unpacking of who am I, what are my values, what do I want to do, what have I got to offer the world, and ended up deciding that coaching is where I wanted to be and starting my own business was what I wanted to do, that I guess it was a gift, the redundancy plummeting me into that, forcing me to have to think through all those things, meant that this is where I ended up. And if I wasn't forced to think about them, I would have just transitioned into another role. I would have just...
So the universe intervened.
The universe did, in a big way, pick me up and drop me on my butt and said, now stop. What is it that you need to be doing in this next chapter of your life?
That's powerful, isn't it? Think about that. That is so powerful. You would have just transitioned into another job, and then, and this is probably a little bit premature, but you're 5 months in, 4.5, 5 months, 6 months. How much more value are you bringing now in this autonomous role with your own business, as opposed to if you just transitioned into another job?
Yeah, I can make a really big difference to individuals and organisations doing what I'm doing. I can improve wellbeing outcomes through developing effective leaders. Because if you have rubbish managers, the wellbeing of everybody in that organisation suffers. If we can boost the skills of the leaders that are new and emerging and moving into new roles, and those that are transitioning and their jobs are changing and they're taking on new responsibilities and teams, if they and their organisation can invest in their development, they're going to save so much money to start with, but they're going to save people's well-being. And that's what really drives me, is that well-being should not be an add-on, that it should be built into the way that organisations operate and the way that people experience their work lives. Absolutely. And I know that what I'm offering can support that. I'm not the solution, but I have things that can contribute to them.
And that's what you're talking about, is making it an integral way of how you operate, aren't you? You're saying, yeah, and that it becomes integral to who I am and who we are as an organisation. Have I understood that?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. And it's about making sure that the leaders in organisations are living the values.
Good point.
Of what that organisation says they're doing.
That's right. And here you are, you're living your values, Emerald Nest. Beautifully said, by the way, and say good on you to your children, because that's a beautiful team effort, brainstorming at its best, which just reiterates to me my whole notion of cheer squads and how important they are. I'm looking at the time, we probably should wind up. You've given up almost a whole hour.
Oh, Mary, we could probably talk for several hours about this.
I think we could. And you just bring so much value. I'm inspired. Before today, I didn't know about the 3 critical incidents all on top of each other like that. And I feel quite touched about your courage and your level of responsibility. And I'm pretty certain that the people in the Personal Development Hub, and we intend to put some of these interviews elsewhere, and you'll get an email about that for sure, that what we want to do here is inspire more people, particularly women, I hope, to step up and to shine their light and show their worth. And you are absolutely doing that. And I'm pretty certain you and I are going to be having some more conversations. I think, look, I'm so thrilled to have had you here today. Thanks so much for giving up your time. I'm sure that everyone in the Personal Development Hub is truly grateful. Let's pick your word. One of you grateful. It was a good reminder, incidentally. So thank you so much. I hope you have an awesome rest of your day. You so deserve everything you get, Julie.
Thank you so much for having me here. I'm looking forward to connecting with people in the chat afterwards.
Lovely. Bye-bye for now.
Bye.
This week's episode has come to an end. But the fun doesn't have to stop here. If you have any questions, suggestions, or feedback, head over right now to Twitter and Facebook and like, share, and get involved. Join us next time